Hello, I am Clark Germain, and for the past 2 weeks we have been in this studio, Ocean Way Studio B, recording a series of 6 albums live to 2-track. I have survived. That's according to Jeff Weber. And so has Pepe, my dear friend the Pillowfish, who goes with me everywhere I go.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Severini, and I am the executive producer with Vertical Jazz Records. It's a brand new jazz record label that we started not too long ago. We've been at Ocean Way Recording Studios for 10 days, working on 6 CDs that we are beginning with, or launching, since the label began. And what the whole concept behind Vertical Jazz Records is to bring together recognizable, or let's say jazz musicians that we value, and bring them together with a thematic type of presentation of jazz, with titles that are somewhat recognizable so that they will be picked up by the mainstream audience, as well as maintaining the integrity of jazz, the repertoire of jazz. One of the things that was great on our Vertical Jazz CD, or our get up and go type of upbeat feel, was we had Patrice Rushen on keyboards, on piano, and Ndugu on Chancellor from Earth, Wind and Fire and many, many other projects on drums, and Stanley Clarke on bass. And the three of them had never played completely together in a recording studio. And all of them had expressed to me that they had wanted to experience this and do this type of project.
My name is Stanley Clarke. I play bass.
My name is Patrice Rushen, and I play the piano.
My name is Ndugu Chancellor, and I play the drums.
And we appreciate talking to you guys and being here while you have this wonderful recording going down. Tell us a little bit what you're doing and just the elements of making up this trio in your mind. How does this all work to each one of you? Go for
and
it.
Now back to you, Bob.
And you notice we're looking at you.
Well, this is the way we used to make records. We used to make records where musicians got together in the studio, interacted, played together, and there were very few overdubs. I can remember some of my first sessions, there weren't any tracks to overdub on. This record, as a matter of fact, is direct to 2-track, which means there's no mixing involved. What you hear when it goes down is what you get, which is why we all started to play music in the first place, to just express ourselves and get it over with. When you do it, it's done.
we do that, and then what do we do? Then we go, how about a drum solo, or what do you want to do? Yeah.
Clark, you've been making records as an engineer / producer for 20 plus years, is that right?
That is correct.
And the difference between live 2-track recording and multi-track recording from a non-technical perspective, more of an emotional and a performance perspective, is what in your opinion?
Well, it's definitely all about the emotion and the performance and getting that to tape. And it's a very different process than piecemealing a project together and spending hours overdubbing and changing and fixing things. One of the best things that evolved out of this was as we were recording, and there would be repertoire choices and changes, we saw much more finitely how everything was evolving and how everything was being categorized. Now, I think that one of the things that Jeff did actually very well was know where to put the musicians with which project. For instance, all of the piano players, all the pianists that we used are distinctly different from one another. And each one of their approaches to their instrument seems to fit in perfectly with the theme that they were. Like David Benoit, we did with composers. He went everywhere from Hoagie Carmichael to Dave Brubeck and Thelonious Monk, and did such an incredible exercise in all of that, and everyone came together so beautifully.
Who else was on that record?
With David Benoit, we had Greg Bissonette on drums, who was just killer, amazing. And it was an interesting feel because it was a flavor of hard rock. Greg has played with David Lee Roth, and yet he's also played with Maynard Ferguson, and to bring those feels together. Actually, David and Greg had played together before, but we used Brian Bromberg on stand-up bass, acoustic stand-up bass, and he was incredible because he has a 280-year-old instrument, for one thing, but they each had played with each other and had interacted with each other before, but never the three of them together. And that was one of the things that we found on each CD.
Well, it's funny. My last album, I used a producer that's a contemporary producer, and we did a lot of it that way in sections. And somebody was asking me, well, what was it like playing with Marc Antoine? I said, I've never met him. And at that point, I had never met the guitar player. I had never met the drummer that had played on my record, because they were brought in by the producer, and maybe I was out on the road. Somebody said, well, I'll bring him in, and this is the way records get done. So this process allows us to play off each other, and like Brian was saying, there's a lot of empathy, because in some sections, if he makes the slightest sound, then it's going to blow the take, or if I'm playing and I make a big clan, then I got to stop everybody and start again. It's a real challenge, and I think
it's a lot of personal responsibility.
Yeah, it also, I think, really makes you concentrate. You really get focused on the music. I mean, you have to be right in there every second. If there's a second of, if you space out for 1 second, you're lost, and then boom, you got to start all over.
That's right. That's a concentration. It's over.
Which way did you like? Did you like doing it in that sectional way, or did you miss something?
I like both ways. This is a lot of fun for me, because I did a lot of my early albums with Jeff Weber in this same manner, and then I think it's good to stay up with the times and learn the different kinds of recording techniques. So I enjoy both things, but I suppose as a jazz musician, I still prefer doing it this way. It's a lot of fun.
The life of a recording engineer in a live 2-track project is rough, to say the least. Not only do you have to mic everything even though it would appear to be at the outside similarly to a multi-track recording, what's the difference initially in miking something for live 2-track recording as opposed to multi-track recording?
Miking situation is basically the same if I were to track with the same amount of people at once. Even if I had the ability to fix things, I would still mic them pretty much the same as I mic them now. The major difference would be if I'm going to multi-track and I'm going to need to separate things out and fix them, then I would want more separation than I have in a live to 2-track situation.
The multi-track process is more of a producer's medium, and the direct recording is more of an artist's medium. We control the final outcome, whereas in multi-tracking, someone else could control it. So like he was saying, a month down the road, the producer could take that basic track and overdub it or mix it in a way that it can almost sound like a totally different thing. So again, like you said, there's a lot of flexibility in that, and there's good and bad in that. I would prefer this way of recording, because we know once it's there, the feeling is there, and it's finished, it's done,
To experience this type of project where they could lay down tracks that weren't originals, which many times has, I think, prevented or limited the commercial productivity of a CD, as well as for the jazz record label and the artist. And I think what we had here was something that every artist wanted to do. We wanted to do as a label, and the public will benefit as well, because we'll have...
What type of recording technique is the vertical jazz going to be known for?
Live to 2-track, which is something that Jeff brings to the studio, brings his talent to the studio very well. But one of the things that was interviewed before with the guys that I really appreciated and really kind of says it all is, it's there, it's done, it's history. Once it's done, when Tom Walsh on drums in the last project we just did, which was a very laid-back feel, the horizontal Brazilian feel with wonderful acoustic guitarist Federico Ramos, he said, when you're doing multi-track or when you're doing other recording, it sounds okay, or you're overdubbing, you're punching in, you're doing different mixes, and 2 months later you hear this, or you pick it up at retail and you go, what happened to it? So it's true to form, it's true to the artist, it's true to our ears, and the excitement. It's dangerous, and it's very naked, but it's really, I think, one of the unique and wonderful qualities that vertical jazz will maintain.
I think we want to talk about the fact that it's emotionally satisfying, sonically superior, and obviously it allows us in a short period of time to be at the best facilities, usually in the best equipment we can, because we make a record every other day.
Yeah. Well, I think that, for me it was a real new education as well. And it's a much different ear from a production standpoint, a whole different recording process, and I think that it's appealing to just about everyone. It's a challenge. It's a real big challenge, to say the least, to the artist, but it's a welcome challenge.
With good leakage in a live to 2-track situation that makes it sound good, whereas if I was in multitrack and wanted to fix things, I wouldn't be able to live with that.
Let's talk about, just tell me what separation is and what leakage is.
Well, separation is having space between the instruments and having the physical space, and having the ability to isolate one instrument from another, so that you can then go in and fix that instrument.
Leakage?
Leakage would be when you hear one instrument playing in another instrument's mics. So if a guitar player were playing a solo and he were too close to a string section, you would not be able to then fix the solo in a multi-track situation. Whereas in a live to 2-track, you get whatever he played.
I kind of call it the white version of the Buena Vista Social Club, with a little difference in the ages, but that was the 2 a.m. of jazz.
Yeah, these guys are younger.
These are much younger. But getting them
And they're
together.
still senior citizens, some of them.
Yeah. And we put Chiz Harris on drums and Slide Hyde, who played 3 different instruments, actually. He did the trombone and he did euphonium, and he did bass trumpet, and that was wonderful. And I liked their choice. Oh, we also had Pete Chrisley on saxophone, who was great, and Tom Rainier on piano. I'm getting there. Jim Hewart on bass. And the quintet. It was the only quintet we did, actually. And it was wonderful because their choice and their interpretation and their instrumentation and their relationship with their instruments worked so well with this theme. Very melodic.
Just an interesting sound.
Very interesting sound.
It's so beautiful.
This is real music. This is from the guys. The only technology is you got that's happening is the directed 2-track.
Just to capture.
That's high-tech technology. What you have out here is high-tech life.
This is sort of an extension of something I think the phrase or the word developed back in the 60s or 70s or something, when there was just this bonanza of work here where everybody was working so much. The word was red eye, and the red eye meant the red light. When the red light comes on, everybody's you know what that means. You have to be perfect, because if you aren't, there's 19 guys standing behind you waiting for your gig. But red eye is also a sort of a variation on the word ready, and that's typifies what all of the guys in the studios were. They were ready. When that light came on, bam, whatever you want. It could be Mozart, it could be Willie Nelson, it could be Moby Grape. Whatever it was going to be right, and you got used to that.
On this side of the glass, it's the major difference is it's a lot more immediate necessity to get the mix right immediately, because it's going to 2-track right away. Whereas in multi-track, you get a decent mix up for monitoring purposes so you can hear everything, but it's not your final product. This is much more like live mixing, only it keeps coming back to you because you keep listening back to it again and again.
Mm-hmm. The idea of, quote, getting the mix right involves more than just getting the sounds to tape properly like you would in a multi-track scenario for tracking, right? What's involved in getting, quote, the mix right for you?
Well, for me, it's about the sounds, first of all, which you would need to get the sounds for the multi-track recording, but it's also about the balances and the music itself. So I'll generally listen to them, run it down once or twice, get an idea of the song, and balance according to what I feel the balance for that particular song should be.
And in addition, sometimes you have somebody reading the scores to you in advance due to the complexity of perhaps the arrangement or the amount of people on a live 2-track session, right?
Yeah, if I have an assistant that is there following the score, it helps quite a bit if I don't have a chance to rehearse the piece first. So then they can tell me when, if it was an orchestral situation, the woodwinds were going to take the melody, for example.
So in other words, in a multi-track situation, on a tracking date, it's basically once you get the sounds, it's a set them and forget them, let the guys go, it goes to tape in the highest point it possibly can, and it's a very, it's a preliminarily active position, but not during the course of the session itself or the song itself, correct?
Not nearly as much as in a live to 2-track situation, but it's still, you can't set it and forget it just because of the nature of many microphones that I choose to use and older consoles, which I feel sound better. You always have to be on top of it and listening very intently to make sure nothing has gone bad during a take.
In a live 2-track session, you have not only the sounds to listen to, the balances to listen to, the score supervisor, if there is, to listen to, and an errant producer behind you whispering in your ear.
I just shut him out.
See? That's good. Studio technique. What's one of the advantages of being at Ocean Way in terms of microphones?
Well, there's many advantages. As you mentioned, the microphones is an obvious advantage. Alan Sides has one of the best microphone collections in the world, and he keeps them in top shape. There are other places that have very good microphones, but they're not kept up as well as they are here. Other advantages are the physical rooms themselves that date back to many fantastic recordings, sound much better than a lot of the other rooms that are available, as well as the consoles and outboard gear.
Is there a vibe to a studio that you pick up?
Definitely. I feel a vibe.
With or without Pepe?
Well, I wouldn't say without Pepe that there's a lot of vibe. I have to have Pepe with me. He is my spiritual advisor. But he comes in and he checks out the studio pretty much first, swims around, and then tells me whether it's okay to record in. But there's definitely vibes to these older studios, because you walk in here and you think of the numerous artists that have recorded in these places before I was even born, and it's impressive. Smith Broadway of Jazz. And we also had on that Joe LaBarbera on drums, who was wonderful. Jim DiGiulio on bass, who also had another very old stand-up bass, which gave a lot of amber tones and warmth to it. And we did all the, really well-known, wonderful tunes of jazz. I mean, of jazz tunes, jazz interpretations of Broadway tunes. That worked really well. Surrey with the Fringe on Top.
Paul's a burner, isn't he?
Yeah. My whole feeling of Paul on piano was like, he plays that instrument like a harp. I mean, he's all over it, and it's just, and the fact that I thought you did such a great idea in putting them into the Broadway was because his relationship with the piano and his instrumentation to me is very orchestral, which worked very well,
He fills up a lot of space.
He fills up a lot of space.
And it's a very rich.
And it's a completely different feel than what we had with, Patrice and with David Benoit and Tom Rainier.
lot of times if you do it, once and twice and then add something and dub something, then it starts to lose the spontaneity. That's what I like about the direct, because you just do it and it's, it's usually a good track with the spirit, everybody's spirit is happening. You do one or two and you got it.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I feel about it. It's probably half and half, and basically, how I feel.
We've made the choice to go to quarter-inch analog tape because I still prefer analog to any of the digital formats. It has to eventually wind up in the digital domain, but I like to have the biggest picture I can before it actually goes into the digital domain. And every time I have a chance to do a project like this, the past 4 or 5 attempts, I've always A-B'd the half-inch versus the quarter-inch. And the quarter-inch has still beat the half-inch sonically. More open.
So in your opinion, the quarter-inch beats not only the half-inch analog, but also any type of multi-track or 2-track digital machine, or any type of Pro Tools configuration?
Hands down. It beats any of the currently available digital situations. In a multi-track situation, I have a Pro Tools system now, and I am starting to record things to Pro Tools, because it's just so convenient to be able to edit things and move them around. But as far as straight sonic sense goes, nothing beats a good analog machine, particularly the machines they have here at Ocean Way. The Ampex machine with quarter-inch is unbeatable.
It's an interesting statement about technology to realize that we're using quarter-inch analog tape to do true high-fidelity recordings.
Well, aside from the technology angle of using quarter-inch tape, we're also using microphones that were made before even that format was used. So all of the technology, this console, most of the majority of outboard gear that I prefer to use is older equipment.
Interesting take. This particular facility is known for its kind of state-of-the-art, vintage state-of-the-art, I guess I could say, gear, and that allows us a certain flexibility when it comes to an overall warmth. Would you say it helps build a characteristic of warmth and detail?
Warmth and detail are part of it, but it's also a clarity and openness in the high end that the modern equipment, some of the modern equipment is good, but the majority of modern equipment loses that because there's a budget at the bottom of all of that equipment, and the original design team goes in with sonic integrity in mind, but by the time it actually comes out to a mass-produced product, the quality of the electronics that goes into it has come down considerably.
Well, let's see.
Talk about sex in the studio?
Okay. On the night before a very dangerous, live 2-track recording, does sex affect the way you perform?
I generally like certain types of sex before 2-track sessions as opposed to before multi-track sessions. I really won't get into the details of
But as they say,
types.
position in life is everything?
That's what they say.
And you're leaving me out?
You didn't? Oh, you heard that from out there?
Yes!
This is Suzanne Severini. Keep an eye out for Vertical Jazz Records and rise to the occasion.